Welcome. Today I want to discuss Article 10 that addresses global warming and climate change. This is one of my favorite topics to discuss because of all the failed and deceptive policies that you may have been misled into supporting. This one includes some of the most far-fetched and outrageous tall tales of all. And the worst part of it, the policies propped up by these tall tales, they don't even help the environment. Rather, they hurt the environment. So today, we'll shatter some of the myths being used to destroy both your future and your environment. And you're going to learn how the climate change game is played. The rules are pretty easy to understand. The self-proclaimed masters of our universe, they get to pick who the winners and the losers will be. And then they make the rules for the game to ensure that the people that they pick to lose do lose. And regrettably, they've decided you're going to be one of the losers. And that's why this issue is so important. That's why it's one of the 20 key policies in the doctrine. If you don't want to be one of the losers, then let's talk about Article 10. We reject the environmental hysteria initiated by the media and most in our government. This scare tactic destroys hard-working Americans' jobs, incentivizes companies to move these jobs overseas to pollute even more in countries with less environmental oversight, and turns a blind eye to the ever-increasing record pollution rates of the rest of the world. We support the continued effort in our country to reduce emissions, but not at the expense of our livelihoods. Now, anyone listening to that thinks I'm going to tell them that 7 billion people spewing 62 trillion pounds of CO2 pollution into the atmosphere every year is a good thing, you're going to be disappointed, because it isn't a good thing. And even though they exaggerate the effect to mislead you into playing their game, that doesn't mean we should wait until there's obvious damage to the environment before we do our part to protect it. Now, Mark Twain said, if you don't like the weather now, just wait a few minutes. But our enemies, they've taken this simple truth and molded and manipulated it into a weapon to use against you by taking advantage of your desire to do the right thing for the environment. They do this by having you play the climate change game, where they pick the winners who get to create jobs and wealth and pollute as they see fit, while the losers, they face a barrage of misleading propaganda and draconian environmental measures that make manufacturing so reprehensible and so costly that they become uncompetitive and are forced to shutter their factories and ship their jobs and futures overseas to one of the designated winners. Ironically, the winners pollute more to make the same goods and then pollute further by shipping the goods back to the loser's country. I know it's hard to believe, but that's how the game works. And I'm going to prove it to you today. As many of you already know, the climate change game, it isn't much fun to play if you're one of the designated losers, because you lose your job and your independence, all while the rest of the world damages your environment. Now remember this guy? He's full of tricks. And one of his favorite tricks is the environment. He loves to create misleading illusions and myths about the environment to scare some people into supporting his way and to trick others into going along. But his way is the wrong way. So let's clear up some of the misinformation that he's used to help mislead you into believing that you have to trade your future to save the environment, when in reality, his way hurts the environment and your future. Now, the first myth we should dispel is that America is the world's biggest polluter. While America does have the world's biggest economy, we aren't the world's biggest polluter. That designation goes to China. And it isn't even close. Here's America's total CO2 emissions in 2020. Here's China's. China pollutes over 2.5 times more than we do. But that little distinction seems to have gone unnoticed by our government and the media. But here's even a more telling fact. We pollute less today than we did in 1990. 6% less. Here's the graph showing how we've been able to reduce our CO2 emissions to even less than they were 30 years ago. So you can make a pretty good case that any worsening climate change conditions over the last 30 years have little to do with America, since our amount barely ever increased and is lower now than in 1990. But everyone did that, right? That's myth number 2, that we're all part of a grand global effort to reduce emissions and save the planet. Now, I hate to be the one to inform you, but you aren't part of some grand global effort that's working to save the planet, because that effort doesn't exist. Rather, you're part of a grand global illusion designed to fool you into willingly playing their climate change game. Remember, here's America's CO2 pollution since 1990. But here in red is the rest of the world's CO2 pollution since then. Wow, look at that. The rest of the world didn't pollute less like we did. Instead, they almost doubled their CO2 pollution. So while we were selling off our manufacturing jobs, 6 million of them in case you lost count, and reducing our emissions in the belief that everyone was doing their part to save the planet, everyone else wasn't. Now here's a better perspective on this. Here was our pollution in 1990. Here is the rest of the world. But between 1990 and today, for us, we didn't just hold the line on pollution. We actually reduced our CO2 emissions. And here's what 2020 should have looked like if the world had lowered their emissions by 11% like we did. But instead, with the world supposedly ending due to climate change, the rest of the world added an amount of pollution, not equal to just one America's pollution. Not even equal to 2 America's pollution. It wasn't even enough for the world to increase their pollution by triple our output, because they added over triple our total pollution output. This is crazy. While we were reducing our emissions, the rest of the world added over triple the total pollution that we make. In the world's biggest polluter, China, how much effort have they put in to reduce emissions? They increased their pollution nonstop, as shown here. They increased their CO2 pollution by 383% since 1990. China just added 8 billion tons of pollution, almost double our total in just 30 years. And that doesn't seem like a lot of effort to me. But I know what you're thinking. That's a halfway around the world. But in North America, we're all serious about the environment. Wrong. Here's our CO2 rate increase since 1990 again. But now let's compare it to Mexico. Whoops. No decline there. They added 55% more pollution, mostly compliments of our business leaders shipping our jobs south. In Canada, no belt tightening there either, with an increase of almost 30%. There isn't even an effort in North America. America is the only loser on this continent. We produce 25% of the world's economic output, but we only create 13% of the world's pollution. Yet all the climate warriors in our government and the media, they're concerned about me driving my truck to work today, but they're oblivious to China and the rest of the world's ever-increasing pollution rates. Now let's talk about another myth, because it's a good one. It fools a lot of people. We have to do even more because our CO2 emissions per capita is one of the highest in the world. They show you a graph like this, showing how high we are. And it is true. We do have one of the highest rates per capita. But they think you're too dumb to realize that this information is meaningless unless you consider the per capita economic output of a country with this data. Since it's obvious that increased economic output, it takes more energy. So I did that. And as you can see, America has the highest economic output per capita of any country in the world. So of course we use more energy per person. But the best way to look at this is to determine the environmental efficiency of that economic activity. And there's an easy way to do that. Just divide the CO2 emissions per capita by the economic output per capita. This generates an environmental efficiency of CO2 emissions per dollar of economic activity. So let's look at the results when you compare our economic efficiency to China. You can see that China is over 3 times less efficient than we are. We generate 0.2 kilograms of CO2 emissions per dollar of economic activity. Meanwhile, China generates 0.7 kilograms. And when you compare us to the rest of the world, we are significantly better again, with the rest of the world generating almost double the pollution per dollar of economic activity. This means that every dollar of economic activity in America creates about half the pollution compared to the rest of the world, and just a third of the pollution that it does in China. So if you're solely environmentally focused, investing in manufacturing in America is a better solution for the environment. Yet, these ESG scoring schemes you hear about, they encourage the creation of more pollution by undermining American manufacturers' access to capital, which will lead to the loss of even more of our jobs. But somehow, some people in our country, including many investors, have been misled to believe that selling our jobs off to the highest foreign bidder and replacing our economic production with higher pollution-creating production in other countries is a good environmental solution. It isn't. Plus, this scheme has America well on our way to becoming a third world country. Now, during COVID, there was another climate change detail that fascinated me. So I included a bonus myth today. This myth is that everyone suffered during COVID and had to reduce economic production to help stop the spread. It seemed true. Our emissions free fell during the pandemic due to our government shutting down our economy, and the rest of the world's emissions dropped also. But ironically, in China, their manufacturing output and CO2 emissions, it actually increased during the pandemic. The country where the virus originated, where we were told cities and millions were locked down and their economy ground to a halt. Well, I guess that wasn't true, since in reality, during the pandemic, China was busy taking more of your jobs and increasing their CO2 pollution output by making the goods that you weren't able to make, since your government, our government, forced us to stay home and forfeit our jobs. It's pretty sad. So something has to be wrong here. All the indicators are saying we're doing all the wrong things if we want to help the environment or our country. But the self-appointed masters of our universe, they don't think anything's wrong. This is how they play the climate change game. It's not about helping the climate at all. It's about using the climate as a weapon against you to increase their wealth and power at your expense. So I was curious, is America the only country picked to lose, or are there other countries that have also been designated losers? And if so, what other countries have been deemed winners and can pollute as they see fit? So I did some research and compared the change in CO2 emissions since 1990, just for a handful of countries to look for a pattern. We already know about our country. We've been deemed a loser in this game. And we also know that China, Canada, and Mexico are winners. But how about some of the other countries? How about France? They're a loser with a 17% drop in CO2 emissions. And so was Belgium with a 19% decline. Brazil was a winner with a 110% pollution increase. Poland took a dive with a 21% decrease. Korea wins big, 151% increase. Italy, they're a loser with a 24% drop in emissions. Pakistan was even a bigger winner with a 196% increase. They tripled their output. Serbia lost. They had a 27% decrease. Saudi Arabia win by over tripling their pollution output. Russia, that scary boogeyman ready to take over the world, we're told, well, they aren't winning at this game, loser with a 28% drop. In Iran, the target of endless sanctions and world scorn, at least that's what we're told, even that hasn't stopped them from winning at this game with a 231% increase. Now, Germany, they lost big time, 34% drop. No worries there. India picked up the slack with a whopping 291% increase. Sweden, sorry, loser with a 36% drop. Meanwhile, Indonesia was a winner. They quadrupled their pollution output since 1990. And our new biggest loser on the board, United Kingdom, 39% decline. Long live the Queen, they say, but that doesn't apply to your job if you live there. And I can't even put Vietnam on the scale. They had over a 1,500% increase in emissions. Interesting numbers. And if you take a harder look at them, there is a pattern. The losers are America, European countries, and Russia. And basically, everyone else is a winner. If you're one of the losers who have been sacrificing to save the planet, think about this. For every pound of CO2 emissions that you've been able to save, the winners have polluted not only an amount equal to what you've saved, but they've polluted 10 times that amount. You save one, they create 10. That's how the game is played. Now there has to be some reasoning behind this pattern. Have losers been erroneously chosen because of their high CO2 emissions per capita rate is the sole criteria, out of ignorance, out of how to properly analyze the data? Or losers selected because of their race? Is this another one of those equity or equal outcome schemes? Or maybe just countries with a free and independent middle class are chosen as losers in the climate change game, because when you take the death march, there's no room left for a middle class in the new two-tiered society. Remember? There's only the top tier, made up of the self-proclaimed elite class who have all the wealth and power, and the bottom tier, a powerless serf class that you'll be part of. I don't know the reason for sure, but what I do know is that the world's almost doubled their CO2 output since 1990, yet the Save the Planet crowd isn't interested in that pollution or its effect on climate change, since the climate change game isn't about saving the world or the environment. It's about using the climate as a weapon to destroy your future, because in their end game, you have to forfeit more and more of your future until you eventually live in a box, beholden to them to survive, and of course, with no rights, no freedom, no future. And as a friend astutely pointed out to me, that box you live in, it will also be made in China. So instead of falling for this scheme, let's implement sane policies that will actually help the environment and safeguard our future. And we should start by putting our full support behind our own manufacturing. Not only will that ensure the manufacture of environmentally responsible products that will reduce the world's emissions, but it will also create the jobs and independence that our families deserve. Anyone who believes destroying our manufacturing industries and sending these jobs overseas is a good solution, they're wrong. You don't help the environment by polluting more. You don't help your family by making them beholden to foreign countries for life's basic needs. Now, playing the climate change game is only possible if you have elected officials that are willing to forego your future and play along. But anyone willing to play along in this game isn't fit to hold office. So the second thing you have to do is ensure you don't ever vote for a politician who promotes your participation in this game. Whether it's ignorance that keeps them playing along, or worse, betrayal of our futures, they have to go. And third, this same criteria must be used to examine all the other businesses, churches, and organizations that you deal with on a daily basis. And don't forget about those ESG types trying to use your investments to undermine your family's future. If they want to go along with this climate change game and support this nonsense that deceives you into playing by one set of rules while everyone else plays by a different set, you shouldn't be financing a bigger platform for these people to deceive even more people. And fourth, we have to stay focused on continuing to protect our environment from harm. Because contrary to what they tell you, America is one of the world's leading environmental stewards. We have some of the best engineers in the world. Scores of business leaders that care about the environment. Citizens that love the outdoors and want to preserve the beauty that God's entrusted to them. And some of the best federal and state environmental protection agencies the world over. But we can't be content or get complacent, because we can do more. We have to stay focused so we can stay low while at the same time building jobs and futures for our families. Now remember, recognizing or just complaining about the problem, that isn't enough. Because to ensure our future, we have to create the changes needed to implement Article 10 and the rest of the articles in my doctrine that it calls for. You have to take action. You can do that by using the press plan. Now, if you missed the press plan overview video a while back, go back and watch it now. The press plan provides you with a 5-pronged approach to help you get from where you are today, losing in the climate change game, to where you want to be. You must participate in political action by rejecting politicians who support damaging the environment and your future by playing the climate change game. You have to realign your finances every day to make sure you stop spending your money or donating your money to the groups that want to hurt you and the environment. You have to participate and educate your family and friends. You can do that, one, by passing this video on to them, and also by taking every opportunity to educate them of the climate change lies that have fooled them. You will work to secure your future when you stop participating in the dangerous policies that are undermining your ability to provide life's basic needs for your family. And when you work to prepare for the times when their failed policies limit your access to these basic needs, you'll be doing your part. And of course, when you support enforcers, you short-circuit the power source they use to deceive you. Their power and their ability to fool so many people is only made possible by convincing regular Americans to act as enforcers on their behalf to scare, coerce, or trick you to play a game that ends badly for you. But if we do our part by supporting enforcers, we'll eliminate their power source. We'll be on our way to a brighter future for our families. Now look, don't be fooled by their distractions that cause you to take your eye off the ball and the facts. Destroying our environment while selling our future off is a bad plan for every American. Let's work together to put the environment first, America, and our future. Because the longer you play this guy's climate change game, the closer you get to being game over for you. But I got a better idea. It's time for a new game that puts your family and your future first, and it starts right now. I'll see you next time.